Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to Lore Lines Episode 2. We are going to be talking about the Calamities a little bit more today. Last time we stopped at the Third Umbral Era, but because we lost that VOD, we are going to be doing a quick recap on those first Umbral and Astral eras that we did talk about. So really quick rapid fire round. Let's talk about first Umbral Era and what happened really quick. I'm a little bit echoey, if you could fix
can
me.
adjust that.
Thank you, Bahamut.
You're welcome.
Tell me if that fixed it.
It sounds like it did. Thank you very much. All right, so first Umbral Era, we had the Calamity of Wind. We had the rejoining of the Fifth, and it really was the start of modern history. And the only reason we know it was the Calamity of Wind is because the Mughals up in the Churning Mists at Mogholm kind of mentioned it, and it was basically a process of elimination. All right. Does anyone want to cover First Astral Era really quick? Bonnie?
Bonnie, I think, is going to be in chat most of the time because she's not feeling quite well.
Got it. Okay. So I'll just jump right in.
Go
then.
ahead and do a quick summary, then we'll give our thoughts on it. Go ahead.
Okay. So this was really like the Age of Fire. There's a lot of initial progress attributed to this era. A lot of cave paintings and records indicate that there were a lot of mass extinctions right after this. So a lot of flora and fauna that doesn't exist anymore. And this was really where we started to see early signs of civilization. So transition from that hunter and gathering culture to the agriculture culture, and cities and kingdoms start to develop.
Now, this is the Third Astral Era that we are talking about here. So, after the Calamity of Fire, everyone was pretty much fearful of the gods. Religion was considered pretty much a sacrilege, if you will. Everyone decided to depend on their own talents, depend on their own skills, unique skills. And it was an age of technological marvels and people contributing to the wonders and technologies of the world. There were civilizations accelerating their progress. Most notably, a certain civilization we all know called Alag.
And I know we have never heard of Alag, but they are basically the corner piece of this Third Astral Era. And I know we'd mentioned last week that really the faith in gods in the Third Astral Era was replaced by faith in the self. And it was really the technological peak of Eorzea and the world in general.
This was also a period where aetherochemistry came into play. And I'm going to read a short thing from this. So it goes without saying that the Allagan Empire would never have survived, let alone expanded and thrived, had it not been for the might of we haven't covered this, of course, but Zande, Emperor Zande, was the leader of Alag at the time. He rose to power and became Emperor of Alag during the Third Astral Era. So had it not been for Zande's hand-picked mage cadres, the most important contribution to the Empire, however, was not solely spellweaving, but the incorporation of their magics into existing scientific principles. They valued science over religion, and as such, it brought much progress to the Empire.
Glory be to Alag. So,
Long may she endure.
So let's talk a little bit. I know there was a lot of wars of imperial conquest here. Zande really focused on expanding the empire. We know Amon was really the one in charge. after Zande's death. And we also got the War of Mericidia here. So the invasion of Mericidia, the slaying of Bahamut, and then the subsequent resummoning of Bahamut, which is where we saw that primal who was shoved into Dalamud and launched into the sky to go hang out with Zodiark for about 5,000 years.
Would anyone like to add to this?
Sorry, it's just that the concept of Bahamut hanging out with Zodiac. I'm going to.
I think we broke it out.
And so it begins.
Yep.
No, sorry. It's just that I'm taking. We're just 6 minutes in, and I already have something of note for today's episode.
The moon jokes.
The moon jokes. Yep.
I would also like to add that I think the situation with Dalamud is probably going to become only more relevant as we head into Endwalker. I feel like there's probably going to be a lot of parallels drawn. So I'm most interested to learn all we can about Dalamud because of that.
Yeah, I feel like their original plans for the story regarding Dalamud have kind of been shifted over to the quote-unquote actual moon. Because they did have plans for us to eventually, like, go up to Dalamud and walk around on it. And obviously that didn't happen, so that story must have been shifted somewhere.
They were like, what if we do it again, but even bigger?
Do you think we'll take 80 Ragnarok ships and make a pinion of the moon?
I mean,
but now I want to.
We've got Ragnarok class shards.
So we have a question in chat I really want to address about the Warring Triad. Are they pretty much the first confirmed primals? What do you guys think?
I don't think that they are.
I don't think so.
Confirmed. As we were talking about during the, I think it was the second astral or second umbral, there were people who attained the power of the quote-unquote gods, and as such religion spread out from that, and as such the advent of the third Umbral Era was caused by that, people growing into power.
Let me add a little something, if you don't mind, on the subject of the Warring Triad. It's very interesting, their elemental distribution. The primals we first fight are each associated with a single element. Ifrit is fire, Ramu is lightning, etc. The Warring Triad is each associated with two. Let's see if I can remember them. Zervin is ice and fire. Sophia is lightning and air. And
wind.
Sephiroth is, yes, wind.
Earth and wind.
And Sephiroth is earth and water. Between the three of them, they have all six. And it's sort of, they show a picture of a more complex creation than the more basic Ifrit, Titan, etc.
But this is something of a theme in Heavensward too, because, for example, in Heavensward we have Ravana, who is earth and fire, and if you want to add ice, because there's the showdown with Shiva, you might. And then there's Bismarck, who is lightning, water, and wind at the same time. So Heavensward already plays with the multi-aspected primals, and the Warring Triad came in Heavensward after all. So, but the Warring Triad is more like about duality, like Zervan, for example, ice and fire. That's complete opposites, but in one.
Well, not in the Eorzean chart, but yes, ordinarily we see those as opposites.
We could also add.
Yeah, go ahead.
We could also add Ramu's text during the Realm Reborn quests, where he seems to have knowledge that's long hidden to time. He seems to go back much further. We haven't resolved that yet, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, and there's an interview with Koji Fox where he talks about that, and he says we're gonna reveal that soon, and then like I think 6 years later, we still have no answer for that. So
to shed light for those who haven't remembered, or for those that don't remember, Ramu in the Realm Reborn in patch 2.2, I believe. It's
I'm pretty sure.
2.3.
2.3, okay. He says, and I quote, once Fourth did this calamitous seed spring, in the beginning there was no such duality between man and
between light and dark.
Between light and dark, yeah. So that implies that Ramu was one of the first primals to exist on this star.
It certainly seems that way.
On that topic, and shame on you, first of all, for calling La Habrea's baby basic. Ifrit was one of the first confirmed primals after Zodiark was summoned.
Yeah, based on the dialogue books in the dungeon.
Indeed. And just to touch back on the Warring Triad briefly, their origin is also different from Ravana and Bismarck. They are ancient primals, relatively, from the currently discussed era, that were imprisoned by the Alligans.
That's actually something interesting because yes, the Warring Triad, they're ancient primals. Yes, they're what the proper definition of icon by standards, when we consider icon being like a really powerful primal in a sense. But they are very, very ancient, while Ravana and Bismarck, they're noted both in Heavensward to be kind of new, actually. Like the Nav had before summoned Ravana, and the Vanu, I'm not sure if they had tried, though. So, yeah, that's interesting.
So I'm also going to read a little passage from those who have done the Crystal Tower quest. You might have done this, or you might have read this. It's been a while since you've done this, maybe. For those of you who are newer, it may be more of a refresher. So this is a little bit further down in the Third Astral Era, towards the end. Zande has risen to power, but fears he might lose it. So what he did was he constructed the Crystal Tower in order to harness the energy of the sun. But wielding the power of darkness required prodigious amounts of energy, wielded energy that not even the Crystal Tower could produce. In order to augment the shortfall, Dalamud was created and launched into the heavens. On high it hung, gathering the sun's energy and channeling it to the tower below. However, a miscalculation resulted in a surge of energy that escaped into the land. This triggered an earthquake of unprecedented violence, the calamity that ushered in the Fourth Umbral Era. We see this echoed in the Bosnia disaster, the Bosnia Incident. Similar, but not to do with the Crystal Tower.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So this was poor planning on the Alligans' part, because they built something that could withstand all the energy, but built it on something that couldn't. And I think Bosnia is a good parallel for it, but I also think that Bosnia Citadel just couldn't handle the amount of power it was trying to draw from Dalamud. It was no Crystal Tower.
And I go back to what was said in at the end of 5.3, and what Graha said. The beacon of hope for mankind, and Olympus not heeding the lessons of the past. What they tried to do with what the Guardians tried to do with Dalamud was try to harness the power of the moon itself and try to bring it down. What they constructed was a satellite, basically a transmitter, the lunar transmitter, to harness that power. That in itself was not enough to contain Bahamut's power. It enthralled Midas, and the ensuing energy that it brought down destroyed the Citadel. It destroyed a simple man-made creation. When, if you look to the past in the Third Umbral Era, not even the Crystal Tower could contain that much energy being push down into it. So,
yeah, and I honestly think that was by design. I think that was an intentional design flaw that certain ancient remnants had put in there intentionally.
anyone like to add to this?
Asian plot.
Well,
So I question whether it's a design flaw rather in the tower, or if it's more about the location. Because one, it's essentially a gigantic crystal resonator. And if it has a bunch of power just shoved down into it, it's going to vibrate. So if it's on top of a fault line, then that could cause massive, massive damage. It may not be the tower itself that's flawed.
I would also add that I think it's playing into the themes of hubris and people toying with things that are beyond their understanding, and that will probably continue to be relevant going forward.
I mean, that's basically what happened with Omega and Alexander in Shadowbringers. It's very much, we barely understand these concepts, but we know they can do these things, so let's apply them even though we don't fully comprehend them.
It's not impossible this will also be relevant to the Ancients' fall as well.
And then the Ironworks actually came to understand all of those, but that's the funny thing.
Well, the rejoining made them smart. Smarter.
Yeah, smarter.
Right.
But they're already pretty darn smart.
Core healer or Foul?
The things I would like to discuss are wildly off topic, so I will hold my tongue.
That's the same thing here.
So let's talk a little bit about Oz's Law before we move on to the Fourth Umbral Era. Oz's Law, obviously, carved out of the ground, launched up into the sky as a research facility where they had the Warring Triad and all this other stuff that has been criminally underused in the game so far. But what do you guys think was the purpose of Oz's Law?
Probably had several purposes, like researching potentially even space travel with that giant spaceship that they have parked in the middle of it, but also researching like what we know of regarding the Warring Triad, like all of the things they wanted to try and do with primals and dragons to enslave them to their will.
So
I have some thoughts here as well. I'll let Ayumi go. No,
okay.
It's okay.
So I recently took a field trip, if you will, around Azizla with Bonnie, and kind of went in and around all of the various locations there, various listed locations. What we found was a bunch of secret hidden laboratories, and a bunch of, the southwest end of the map was especially curious because it contained a chunk of Mericidia, which had been broken off, and they had somehow floated it into the sky. And in each of the research labs that we looked into, there were abominations, there were glowing crystals of some kind, there were just these random experiments that made you wonder what exactly were they trying to discover or unleash.
Well, we could again, if we go to Stormblood 4.4 and we pay heed to some lizards in the Azima Steppe, they would tell us an interesting story about the tainted land being torn from aloft, and at the same time that Dalamud was already launched into the sky, since Yashtola says that the ether in the burn is the same as the ether in Nazi's land. That only can happen if both locations are one and the same. which means if the lizards actually refer to the land which made us as the tainted land, and considering how many things these lizards know, I have many questions.
Are you calling the Aura lizards?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
I mean,
I'm just teasing.
They're not going to kill me.
I mean,
they're
they
not
do come from eggs.
They're not Banga. They don't take it personally.
Well, we may have Aura in chat, so please. I'm kidding, Meowth. Don't hit me.
Oh, I thought you were kidding about having lizards in chat.
So,
They don't exist.
Wow.
Aura don't exist.
Regarding Isis Law, I mean, one might imagine several reasons why a civilization like Alag might float continents. I mean, just the science of getting them floated is a worthy research purpose. Once you're up there, you've got 3 primals operating as a battery to do what? To power the whole facility. So I don't take it to be anything specific, but it's clearly a gigantic research continent. And I don't know. Do you think that mothership is actually a mothership?
I certainly get the sense that it's some kind of ship.
It has an interesting spire going out the bottom.
Yeah,
it's very tall.
It's called the flagship.
It is.
There's also. Do you actually recall the whole thing with Proto Ultima, which later appears? Yeah, I know it was put on Duna's Cave just because they made the
boss
kind
fate.
of Well, the Proto Ultima, the reason they actually pulled off to explain why Proto Ultima appeared in Duna's Cave is that it was designed to track huge readings of energy readings, which makes me wonder if Proto Ultima was not well. We actually know little about the Ultima weapon, only that it was excavated from some ruins under Alamigo. So there's that. It was mentioned the thing that back in 2.0 actually that the Ultima weapon was under Alamigo, and that's why we say Alamigo only means trouble.
So I'm going to read a small passage about Ozzy's Law from the book. I know it's from our Charlayan evil undoers, but it's still lore regardless.
Dunderheads.
I love that you called them dunderheads.
So, with the Crystal Tower buried, a civilization which had almost completely relied on the tower's energy to function was plunged into utter chaos. Machines ground to a halt, lamps fell dark, lines of communication and transportation were severed. Those who served on an artificially levitated employment sector, such as Ozzy's Law, were suddenly trapped. The flow of supplies upon which they relied for the maintenance of their facilities dried up. Without the energy and manpower to keep them in check, the chimerical aberrations contained in these quarantined areas escaped their cages and soon turned on their creators. So it was, in a sense, a flagship, but also a giant research complex where Alligans were hired to perform experiments, to do research.
To make chimeras of all sorts.
Also, if anyone's curious about the aforementioned glowing crystals and whatnot, those are in the quarantine block in Ozzy's Law. If you fly down, you can actually go inside that building and take a look around. It's actually quite interesting. I would highly recommend doing so.
Well, that's not very well quarantined, is it?
I also highly recommend just doing field trips out in the world, period, because you can fly in Eorzea now. You'll actually find a lot of cool things and a lot of things you could not or did not see to begin with first go around.
Yeah, especially in the zone Camp Drybone is in. Oh my god, now that you can fly there and go into the gulches and valleys there and see what's there, those are incredible to look at. I highly recommend that.
You can look at a lot closer the ruins of Beladian, like sculptures and reliefs of Azima that are there, as well as like more in detail of the Burning Wall.
There are a couple of let's see. Bonnie and I also did a couple of flybys of. There was a camp. It was in Camp Drybone, but we went to the Far East. We discovered a Ragnarok class ship fragment that was stuck in the ground, and we also discovered another one in the Kurthus Central Highlands. And
really, was it shaped like the one in the Endwalker logo?
It was a fragment,
Right.
and it was sticking out of a mountain. So there are several of these that we know now.
Where in the Far East?
It was sticking out of the formation, the crystal formations.
Yeah, not the Far East as in Hingashi, the Far Eastern section of.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
we did go out together. I remember this.
Okay, so we've talked about the Elegant Empire a little bit. There is a ton of information here, but we've got to move on. So we know that the Calamity of Earth happened. We're under the Crystal Tower, buried it. It basically destroyed Allegan energy production systems, and civilization pretty much ended. And then we start moving into the Fourth Astral Era. Sorry, not the Fourth Astral Era, the Fourth Umbral Era.
The Fourth Umbral Era was the Calamity of Earth. So that was, in fact, the actual era of when Zonde fell and civilization kind of ground to a halt itself.
Yeah, and so this was the rejoining of the third. Like you had mentioned, Azazla was isolated. There wasn't any energy being generated. It was very reminiscent, actually, of the Eighth Umbral Era, where cerulean power stopped working and Magitech just stopped. And this is really where the Cloud of Darkness and the Void really comes into play with Zonde, I believe, where they had all been frozen inside the Crystal Tower, frozen in time by Princess Selena.
Yes. Zonde had basically unleashed a conquest of both the south and across Eorzea. He had a mad lust for power, and that was further enhanced by his ability to tap into the World of Darkness and make a covenant with the Cloud of Darkness. Now, after his victory in Miracidia, he went on to subjugate their champion, Bahamut, and imprison him in a sphere, the Iron Sphere, the Iron Satellite, Dalamud, which was launched into the heavens and served as a reservoir of energy for them. That, of course, ended very poorly, as it turned out, and was the cause, actually, of the Fourth Umbral Calamity.
Kaboom. So yeah, that actually reminds me a lot of I don't know if it was SimCity 3 or 4, where you had the microwave reactors and it could miss and just hit your city, and then that's the end of your city.
Actually, now that we speak of the end of your city, we know the Crystal Tower, but do we actually know, Jot, about the Elegant capital city?
Hasn't it been?
I don't.
Wasn't it implied to be like in the vicinity of the tower? Like
it was implied, but I don't think we've seen ruins or anything like that. Although, frankly, the tower had been buried before our events, our timeline.
It might be also that there's really nothing left of it.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
I really just need to get the world's biggest shovel and go to town on Mardona.
Exactly.
Kind of like the Sons of Saint Coin after doing.
I'd like to offer a clarification. It's a little bit tangential, but related to Bahamut. For anyone who didn't catch up on the conversation with Tiamat, Tiamat actually summoned her brother after he fell in battle, and that was enslaved, not the original living being Bahamut.
Correct. And the one that was enslaved was not a good copy of the original. It
Very
was
bad
full of
copy.
Rage, filled, and uncontrollable.
And Terraflare.
And Terraflare.
Terraflarer.
In some ways, we're not really fighting Bahamut. We're fighting Tiamat's sorrow and anger over
Correct.
Bahamut's death.
Yes. All right, so
let's go ahead and move on to the.
Let's go ahead and move on.
Just a note about.
Go ahead, Meowth.
Thanks. Just a note about the fourth Umbral Era. That's basically when looking eastward. That's when the more or less when the Queen's Blades betrayed Queen Gunildur, right?
Oh, you're talking about Queen Gunhildur and the Blades.
Yes, because
before the Bosnia Incident.
Because they chose Queen Gunildur to protect them from the earthquake and stuff, so that would be Fourth Umbral Era, right?
I think Bosnia happened much more recently.
Well, no, there would have been an ancient Bosnia relative to our current one.
Correct.
Yes,
yeah, like
where
original Queen Gunhildur
originally came from.
And the original Bosnia before this more recent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been the end of the Third Astral Era going into Fourth Umbral Era is when that Queen Gunhildur would have became a thing.
Right. So we can attribute that to Fourth Umbral Era pretty easily. After Fourth Umbral Era, though, Crystal Tower is buried. Everybody's locked in time inside there. And then we move into the Fourth Astral Era, the Age of Fear or the Forgotten Age. And I love this era just because we don't know anything about it.
This is actually a very interesting part.
It's a complete blank slate. Anything could happen.
So what happened during this? Go ahead, because you love this part.
Yeah. So I really, there's a lot of speculation here, but I really think we have more pieces about the Fourth Astral Era than we think we do, and a lot of that dates back to Stormblood and the Evilise raid. So Yumi, if you want to talk a little bit more about the Fourth Astral Era and what happened here, take it away.
So what had happened here was that the fall of technology, the fall of civilization, pretty much rendered the world into a period of like a dark age where no recorded history was done. Everything was just by word of mouth. The churches that had held power beforehand again rose up and had written their own accounts of history, and they were taught to the men and women of the cloth because the people who had technology beforehand were all wiped out. So religious leaders went even as far as introducing a new alphabet for their scriptures taught only to men and women of the cloth so as to solidify their control over the realm through the continued illiteracy of the common people. It is therefore ironic that this alphabet for the privileged would eventually evolve into the Eorzean script used today.
Which I think is actually really interesting because according to the second lore book, the language spoken during the Fourth Astral Era does not match the modern Eorzean language. So here it says most languages spoken today, including Eorzean, can be traced back to an Allegan dialect that dominated the Third Astral Era, a dialect believed by Allegan scholars to have originated with the ancient Huron tribes of Aldenard. Skipping ahead, however, the coming of the Fourth Umbral Era severed the bonds that held the empire together, forcing large populations into relative isolation. With no simple means of communication over great distances, the Allegan dialect shattered, each shard experiencing an independent evolution, which over hundreds of generations saw the rise of countless new languages.
So basically, pretty much anything during this age, pursuit of that which lied beyond man's ken, pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of things that would eventually come to pass if you basically all worked together, whatever, was seen as a sin. There was no working together. There was just
evil,
pretty much subjugation of the church. Kind of like what Ishgard experienced for a while.
I think it's very interesting that we see so many parallels to modern Eorzea in these astral and umbral eras, especially like you said with Ishgard and that whole religious zealousness that they had in this Fourth Astral Era. And talking about the power of the church in this era, the shunning of technology, it just reeks so much of tactics for me. And this really is where I think that the whole Evilise storyline, where we see Ramza and Ultima and those heroes caging her away, I really think this is where that took place as far as 14 lore is concerned.
Do we have any idea how long this era is?
This one was about 1900 years, I believe.
Go ahead, Meowth. Sorry.
No, it's just that personally, my take is that in Evilise, it's true that from the standards, it could be part of it, but the calamities and overall the Evilise seems to be Dalmasca, Naxia, kind of not far eastern, but not Eorzea. And
more of a Near East. More of a Near East.
Yes, and the calamities, we know that considering Bosnia, they did affect kind of not just Eorzea, but the calamities actually seem to focus on Eorzea. So I wouldn't take the case of the Allagan Empire and the situation of the Fourth the Fourth Astral Era into Evilise, because Evilise is a different thing from Eorzea. So the thing, the Second Astral Era and the rise of religion could have still been a thing in Evilise and carried on throughout the Fourth Astral Era. We don't actually know for how long Evilise stood, but I think Evilise is quite more ancient, considering how much of it is buried and stuff. But that's just we don't really know exactly how long Evilise goes. But the fact it's also tied with Bosnia that has Allagan lore and stuff makes me think that Evilise goes even before Alec. That's just a theory, actually.
I have some thoughts as well on this. I actually think that the argument that a lot of this may have happened during the Fourth is probably correct. However, in this universe, we have so many buildings and structures that seem well beyond the capacity of a religiously focused, non-organized, nobody's cooperating society. So I imagine actually that Ultima the High Seraph being sealed deep beneath the earth may be from an earlier age, whereas the events of Ramza, etc., may be in the Fourth.
I remember talking to Genomus about this, and he actually mentioned the original Zodiac Brave story involving a character named Ajora, who I think may have more been associated with Seraph's original coming, and that Ramza was with his friends later on attempting to prevent Ultima from orchestrating through various means under the guise of the War of the Lions to reemerge from the prison that Ajora and them had put it in.
Right. So the question is, how long ago were those events?
Really? Yeah, and that's what I don't think.
Could that have happened within 1900 years? Possibly.
Maybe.
I don't know.
We don't really know enough information to know. Like, it's all kind of more speculation.
I actually really like the idea that this was something stemming from the Second Astral Era that they had to deal with in the Fourth.
History seems to repeat itself a lot, like a lot.
I mean, supporting argumentation for these would include the Tower of Rabanastre, which is adjacent to a massive watery sinkhole which did not exist when it was constructed, which is part of the raid storyline. I don't have all the details on hand, but I do remember the cutscene a little bit.
The Ridderana Cataracts.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, the cataracts, and then going all the way up to the top. I mean, practically a floating castle in the sky, passing demigods on the way up. It doesn't seem like a Fourth Age civilization had that capacity.
Yes,
no, I totally agree with that.
But still, if we for example place the destruction of the clockwork city of Gog in the Fourth Astral Era, that would mean if the Lex and Tails theory is correct, that would place the displacement of the Gugans, and therefore the birth of the predecessors of Garamond. If the Lex and Tails theory about their origins is true, of course.
Neela or Bonnie, have anything to add?
I have something to add, though. I want to back up to the tower itself and the way that language was split off and changed afterwards. It's another Tower of Babel reference from the biblical reference. Mankind built up to the sky, and they were cast down, and then their language was scattered. Just interesting. I think the Sundering itself also mirrors this, but this is again, history repeating because it's been forgotten. It's a big theme.
History seems to repeat in a lot of ways in all the calamities, but also in little things like language and what the actual sharded peoples and their nations do within themselves and to each other.
Absolutely.
All right. So, yeah, really fascinating era. Bonnie.
I got nothing.
Okay. Well,
nothing. Okay.
Fifth Umbral, the Calamity of Ice.
The coolest one.
The one involving the Makote.
Ice cold.
Yes, the Makote Umbral Era. That's what the real calamity was. All the Makote streaming back into Eorzea over the ice bridge. This was the rejoining of the Sixth. So you've got frozen landscapes. So you had a lot of mass starvation because crops were unable to grow. The Makote return to Eorzea and steal the Eorzean alphabet, destroying Seeker lore forever.
Congratulations, Makote. You sealed your fate.
Disgusting.
So it's called the Age of Eternal Frost. This was a nickname for it throughout history. So let me bring it back up here. Without the ability to grow crops, much of its population perished or was forced to flee to the south and its more temperate climates. So this saw migrations of the north down south. So it is believed for the years that encompassed that the Fifth Umbral Era, encompassing the Fifth Umbral Era, or as it's known, the Age of Eternal Frost, much of the blood-brine sea was frozen solid, on one hand preventing fishing and decimating the populations of sea life, but on the other allowing for the migration of the Makote tribes from southern Ilsbard, which is the central continent for those that actually aren't familiar with the three great continents of Eidolon.
The ones we're aware of, anyway.
Right. And it
so technically...
Go ahead.
No, so technically, Makote are both from certain lore snippets that I can't remember. Makote are both originally from Mercidia and from southern Isabard. Actually, we do see a fair bit of Makote during Bodja, actually, which makes me actually wonder if they and the Hrothgar are maybe related because the Hrothgar are Ilsabardian as well, and they share some traits at last. But anyways, aside from theories, that means that Makote of course, they're not originally from Eorzea, and that's...
As far as we know, Hrothgar are from the north and from northern Ilsbard. As far as we know. That was a lore tidbit, I think, that Koji Fox confirmed.
I do remember something like this, and the fur might mean something.
Mm-hmm. So Ilsabard's probably got a lot of cat people, basically.
Which makes sense.
Well, hilarious tangent.
No wonder the Guardians conquered everything.
I still think the Mikote are the most populous race in the game.
Hear that, people?
Makes sense if they're warm.
All you cat people, thanks a lot.
I would wonder if that's like true between both Sunseekers and Moonkeepers, like depending on their different cultures, how much they actually are able to populate relative to one another.
That's a good point.
And regarding the thing that the Seeker of the Sun lore was destroyed, yes, for the most part in Eorzea, yes. But we've seen Seekers and Keepers both in the Bogdan quest lines that are part of, well, Ilsabard, and some of them are Dalmascan, Naxian, and stuff. So they may hold still some remnants of that in Eorzea lost ancient story, which is kind of amusing that stuff is ever the Eorzea is always losing knowledge.
Neela or Bonnie or Core Healer, anything?
Nothing beyond what I already had.
If I say anything, I'm getting bonked. So.
So I found an interesting tidbit in the lore book actually on Mikote history. Unsurprisingly, given their self-bestowed clan name, the Seekers of the Sun count numerous devotees of Azema, the Warden, among their ranks. So the Mikote are literally our people.
Yes.
Catboy cannon.
Right.
Yeah,
particularly ironic for some of us.
Yeah.
Yes, the Seekers are worshippers of Azima. The Keepers are worshippers of Memphina, are basically worshipping the sun and the moon. So yeah, marvelous, absolutely. Which actually is another branch of worshipping Father Azim and Mother Nama for the lizards. You know, so yeah, it's basically all of the same.
So let's go ahead and move on into the Fifth Astral Era, which is one of my favorite periods, actually. Cobron, you want to take this, or do you want me to start with it?
Yeah, so we've got the rise of the 12 city-states here. This is really where we see some heavy, hardcore magic start to develop. This also is where we see the rise of the city of Maha. We see Amdapor. We see Nim, and the War of the Magi, of course. And this is just an absolutely incredible era, and really what I think is the start of the starts of civilization that we see now in Eorzea really originated here.
So at the dawn of the Fifth Astral Era, what had happened was the whole world was basically encompassed in ice, and they were huddling in small settlements or just small groups praying to the god. Basically, religion came yet again back into view. They beseeched the 12 to give them comfort, give them warmth, give them any kind of shelter that they could from the age of endless frost. For any of those who have been in the Black Shroud in the game, you may have noticed that a certain cathedral was built in the Shroud. And I'll read a passage here. It was during this time that a magnificent cathedral was built on the edge of the Black Shroud, a sanctuary where people would fervently pray to the gods and harness the power of their blessings through the use of magic. These rituals rose in prominence as a way for the survivors of the Fifth Calamity to cope with its era's bleak prospects and serving as a driving force in the realm's revitalization. What this meant, basically, was kind of like a combination of what the end of the second into the third Umbral and Astral eras, and then back into the fourth. We saw a rise of religion yet again to save humanity, to save the races of Eorzea, to basically bring power and balance back upon Hydaelyn. Anyone else want to have anything to add?
I just noticed something very interesting about that. So the first time they found religion, as it were, was in after the Calamity of the Lightning, was it not? And the prayers gave rise to the first magical incantation.
That's right.
And now, on the ice side, we have it again. Zodiark is aligned with lightning, Hydaelyn is aligned with ice.
Isn't that cool?
That's probably not a coincidence.
Coincidence? I think not.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
Don't listen to Hydaelyn's lies.
Don't believe
Yeah.
Hydaelyn's lies.
Also, I would like to point, if I may, that Cobra mentioned Amdapor, Neem, Mac, and everything. I would want to point out a certain one that we know absolutely almost nothing and still irks the hell out of me, and that's the Scala.
The Drowned City, yes.
The progenitor of Alamigo.
No wonder why it irks me.
Yeah,
of course.
No,
also
but
interesting to note that each of the great 12 city-states followed a specific deity of the 12 at this point. So now we're really seeing the 12 come into major prominence at this point.
You may recall also that there is a parallel drawn between the 12 and, of course, what we know today as Azim's companions. There's a theory that they are one and the same, but as far as we know, they are not. The 12 originally were Eorzea's, I would say, put them more along the lines of champions. One of them was responsible for actually saving, well, we'll get to that in a bit because it's the calamity coming up is aligned with that of the person's exploits. So go ahead, Meowth.
I was what I was going to say was Scala, that that's something I mean, you know, it's this city that's drowned in the locks in Garabania, that we hardly know anything except what Alfino tells us, that before the flood it had already fallen, so perhaps it was one of the first victims of the war of the Magi, which is coming right up. But we hardly know anything about the Scala, and it's only mentioned for one at first sight random quest for treasure hunting with Armvold and Alfinod, and it's in this strange city that we hardly know anything about it. And I have actually spent a lot of time diving in the logs and trying to find stuff for Scala, and it's kind of for in summary, it seemed to have been a huge ass city.
It does seem massive. What's interesting is just about all we have on it is that the Mad King used it as a chimera crafting dungeon.
Kind of sounds like someone else we know.
Indeed.
Yeah, I immediately think of the court magician of Wilbert.
Yes, exactly. Same.
Yes,
But also
that's
to a
actually.
lesser
Same kind of madness.
So I'll go ahead and go on into because this is my favorite era that I like to research, anyways. So I'm gonna go ahead and go on into kind of explaining each of the city states. Well, the three main city states that would become embroiled into the War of the Magi, and one of them would be the one who would be instigating actually the War of the Magi, which is Mach. During
the good guys,
progenitors of my favorite job.
So during the year 800, this is actually to the year, a sorceress by the name of Shatoto, not to be confused with Shantoto, Shatoto, came into power and came upon a ruinous form of magic, which today we all know as void magic or the beginnings of black magic. And it was a tale passed down by the practitioners of the art in the Order of Naldthal, which those of you who have started in Ul'dah should know very well. And it was Shatoto who developed the ability to draw upon the ambient aether to imbue her spells with deadly power. Thus did the realm witness the birth of modern black magic. So the Magi did use this newfound knowledge to bolster the strength of their army and were successfully able to weather the tumultuous ebb and flow of feuds that reduced many other city-states to rubble, ultimately rising to become a substantial military power. This basically led them to, if you think along aetherochemical lines or aetherology lines, to be aligned with chaos. Now, moving on.
I could definitely see that.
Moving on to Amdapor. So, at the dawn of the Fifth Astral Era, a group of Hur arrived in what is now the South Shroud, and the area in which they settled was an open plain interspersed with like massive outcrops of highly light-colored rock, distinctly benefit of the thick forest cover, which is now the region of the Black Shroud. By the year 300, Central Aldnard had transformed into the bustling city. It was an actual city, not a castle or whatever. It was a city of Amdapor. So, what had happened was, let me go back over this. The Amdapori initially harnessed basic magics for the use in their city's defenses, drawing and expanding upon the primitive knowledge of golem creation to temporarily imbue stone statues with life. However, in the 9th century, the century after Mach rose to power, the mages of the ancient city bore witness to Mach's use of the destructive arts to subjugate neighboring city-states. Wary of their neighbors' ambitions, the Amdapori sought to counter these black magics by improving their own spellcraft, weaving it with the intent to purify, ward, and heal, the art of white magic. It has been argued that without the discovery of white magic, Amdapor would likely have been succumbed to Mach's ambitions. So, before I go into Nim, there is an interesting passage in the second lore book, and this is right around the time of the War of the Magi. So, as they were feuding with Mach, they eventually came across. They were gifted. I'm just gonna say they were gifted because this is my theory. They had the ability to craft their golems, in the shape of otherworldly beings. Now, the otherworldly beings that we've seen, if for those of you who have done the Lost City of Amdapor, you know that there is certain enemies at the very end that look like a white lion, a kind of like a seraph, basically kind of like Sin Eaters almost.
The Kuribu and the yeah.
So it's basically Sin Eaters. So in a sense, they were given the knowledge, or had the knowledge of crafting their golems in the image of transcendent beings from another plane. How they came across this knowledge is still unknown. Whether they knew what the first beings looked like, or whether they were given the knowledge by, we'll just say, unknown forces at work behind the scenes.
So I really don't think, although it's possible the flood of light could have started on the first by this point. I don't think it did. But I latched on to what you said about them creating golems and making them look like Sin Eaters. But this is the same technology we see on the first with the Taloses, that we really see rising in Amdapor as well.
I would also say that Sin Eaters may, like Void Scent, be a natural result of an overabundance of light that wouldn't necessarily be unique to either the source or the first. And that they could potentially arise in any situation where light is overly abundant.
So by over-aspecting light, they might have just created an exactly identical process.
That was the point I was going to bring up as well. Because, again, it happened in Vobert. You do something wonky to the soul and you get this beast coming out of it. And I use that word very intentionally. It's not impossible that in their experimentation, trying to find white magic, they might have oopsied a little, created some of these creatures, had to put them down and been like, you know what, I like their style, though.
The only thing I have a problem with that is it says very specifically transcendent beings from another plane.
True.
That is true. That's a good point.
It could be anywhere, really. It didn't even necessarily need to be the first.
They might use the shard most associated with light to begin with.
Keep in mind, this is from a Charlian perspective, and they probably assumed it was from another plane instead of just creating this.
Considering they know Void Center from another plane, and these guys look very much like Void Sense, but white and gold. I could see them assuming
like
that.
Golems, though.
Yeah,
well, and these are constructions created in their image, obviously.
Yeah,
they don't want to have a bunch of these things running around.
Yeah, they're still arcane constructs that are limited and don't have a will.
If we want to go a little bit more tinfoil hat as well, we could theorize that, in the civilization of Amdapor, they might have had echo users capable of seeing into the future interdimensionally, because, the echo is our let's explain everything mechanism.
So we actually do know for a fact that there were people with the Echo that could see into the future in this era, and they were actually the ones that predicted the Sixth Umbral Era was coming.
See, that's where things start to get interesting, because I said one of my two theories was, one, they knew that the first had these beings on the other plane, or two, they were gifted that knowledge. As we know, Ascians are creators and constructors of chaos and rejoining of shards. So it would not be out of the realm of possibility for them to give Amdapor the not just the knowledge, but the imagery that they need to construct these things. Mach had already pulled their type of imagery by using Void Scent, which is from the 13th anyways. Go ahead.
Yeah, but Mach didn't use golems. They just straight up summoned Void Scent and control them with the Nullstone.
There may not have been a place to summon Sin Eaters from yet.
Here's another possibility. Every time we see our character get an echo vision off another echo user, for example, Ardbert and the other Warriors of Darkness, they also have a simultaneous one. It also happens with Fordola.
And Mikoto.
What if somebody had a vision off an Ascian? What if the Ascians either didn't guard against it or chose to give it and they saw it that way? And just another possibility.
That is too, yes.
I personally, I think that Sin Eaters as of that moment, unless we consider the time fuckery that happens between the shards. I would say that while Mac did have the 13th and the Void to draw from, I would say that Amdapor was more like the product of experimentation. That since after all, the Senators are basically infusing us all with light ether, we actually see in the dungeon light sprites. And whole pure light sprites, which are mobs actually, and it could be entirely possible that they try their hand at replicating the process with voicens, and it went wrong, and then they decided to keep the thing. But I think that the first shenanigans are still. I would say there, unless it happened something similar in another shard, the Asians maybe probably didn't even know about Senators. They do know about voicing, and they are fond of using them in certain cases. But Senators, nah.
Precisely the same thing, just the opposite element, or the opposite umbral instead of astral.
Sin Eaters also have a tendency to create more of themselves, whereas Void Scent just seem to be eating and only eating.
So I'll go ahead and move on into Nim now. So near the end of the 500th year of the Fifth Astral Era, which this is about 300 years before the rise of Shitoto, scores of Lalafelian sailors arrived on Vilbrin shores in longboats woven of reeds. Here, the mercantilists built a meager settlement on the southern part of the isle with hopes of establishing trade with the native kobold tribes. In time, their lonely outpost would grow into the maritime city of Nim. So Nim was actually more of like an independent nation. They focused on commerce and defending the small city and nation what they had for that independence. You could say that they were more, if Mach was chaos and Amdapor was astral or static, you could say that Nim was in between. There's a term for it that I know you guys know, and I can't think off the top of my head now.
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium, there we go. So they were the equilibrium of the three, since they did not really reach for power. They instead sought to just improve upon their own means, live in this world, do commerce. They didn't see others as evil, whereas Amdapor was more conservative and kept to themselves, and Mach was much more aggressive and outgoing. So let me first go on to, this is the beginning. This will be the beginning of the Sixth Umbral Era. In order to expand, Mach decided to approach Nim first and foremost. What they did was they unleashed the Nimian Plague, which the Void sent Bitoso, which they sent into the city of Nim, had the ability to spread plague. What it did was it unleashed a disease that was spread amongst all the Lalafelians and turned them into tonberries, which is what you see today at the Wanderer's Palace beneath the floating city of Nim. All of those were once Lalafels, but thanks to Mach's expansion and aggression, they had a plague spread amongst them, and they it's interesting to see that Mach went for Nim first instead of Amdapor when there are the parallels of magic, dark and light. You'd think that they go for those first, but instead the independent one would get struck at first. I guess they would think it more, the smaller nation was easier to be subjugated, and they only sent a single demon there to spread the plague, Betoso. Anyone want
Joke's on them, they had the Nimian Marines.
They didn't.
But actually, there's something kind of, because from this sort of events, the chain of events, you may think, oh, the Magi were the chaotic ones, the bad guys, all that thing. But then we know, it's my cat. Then we know that from the Scholar quest line that Setota's father went into Amdapor Keep to try getting the cure for the plague, and the Amdapori kind of didn't take well I don't actually recall what exactly they did to Setota's father. Did they actually put him in a golem or something? I just recalled it was actually creepy as fuck.
Oh, I remember this. I don't remember what quest. I think it was a scholar quest.
It is the scholar job quest. Yeah. I don't recall the details, but he dies in the Lost City through whatever means, I think after some torture. But I don't know if the fairy is in the golem or if the person is in the golem. Any scholar names?
The fairy wasn't in the Kuribu. The fairy wasn't in the Kuribu.
Oh, okay.
The Setota's father, we find his journal and stuff inside a golem, which raises some questions about Amdapori methodology concern.
I don't think they were ethical just because they were light. You see that again and again. But that also doesn't mean they were the aggressors.
I do want to add that this is the second time that we've had living witnesses from this era. The first being Doga and Une from the Third Astral Era. But this is the Scholar quest line, and all the Tonberries are really instrumental in helping us understand what did happen at the end of the Fifth Astral Era here.
They also tend to be more talkative than Shitoto is in the Black Mage quests about the past.
Oh my god, Shitoto's an asshole.
You're forgetting about Kate Sith in the Shadow of Mac quest line too. That the Kate Sith 2 is a real. This is actually more useful than Shatoto.
I find it interesting to process just how old the Tonberry are, frankly.
So it's the War of the Magi started. Oh gosh, and you have a timeline for this, Koberon. When did this start? Because it started when Mach unleashed Betoso.
Yeah, so that was, I want to say it was around the 1000th year of the Fifth Umbral Era, not Umbral Era, Astral Era. And by this point, the city of Mahat was really the most powerful, and that's when we really see the Nimian Plague come out, and they start declaring war on Amdapor.
Like I said, they declared war on Amdapor after they unleashed a single void sent into Nim, and they completely just subjugated the race. Here, I'm actually going to just read off what the Nimian Plague was like to the Lalafels. It's pretty horrific. Those who contracted the void sense disease experienced disfiguring symptoms. Their nose and ears melted away, their limbs shriveled, and their flesh turned a ghastly shade of green. Any attempts to contain the plague included isolation of the infected, who were locked away within the Wanderer's Palace, the sacred Nemean temple of Oshan. So basically, the Wanderer's Palace is a giant quarantine zone when you go into it.
Yeah, it's a leper colony.
One wonders how this matches up with the Stone Blight of Norvrand.
Yes, actually, good point. Yeah. I mean,
I wonder if there's some aspected or elemental plague that the Void Scent was using.
I mean, Lamimi's quest is based essentially almost the same that we go through the Scholar quest line. And we actually use later for the Scholar quest line the knowledge we gain from the Stonelight to cure Setoto, for example.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on into the war between Amdapor and Mach. So by the year 1510, and this was about the climax of the War of the Magi, Amdapor had gone on the defensive, whereas Mach had gone on the full offensive. And Mach, they basically repeated the same thing that they did with Nim, and they sent a single Void Scent in to kind of disperse and eliminate those who stood against them, and that Void Scent was Diabolos. So, but however, Mach had severely underestimated Amdapor's defenses. So to withstand Diabolos and the minions under his command, the white mages breathed life into the city's golems, again what I referred to earlier, and gathering their collective strength, they were able to seal away the Void Prince, forcing Mach to withdraw. Yet while the ancient city may have triumphed that day, it was a hollow victory, for it did little to stall the sun as it set on the once great civilization. So basically what had happened was Diabolos was sealed within Amdapor. The Mach could not reach him. It's fast forward to present day. When you do the lost city of Amdapor, Diabolos is still sealed in there. When you beat him, he flies away. Essentially, you have freed Diabolos.
Oops.
Oops, we caused Void Ark.
I mean, can we really say that's a bad thing, though? Because we get to meet Skaffic because of that.
And Leofard.
Absolutely.
I want Leofard to come back, please.
Yes.
We need some Sky Pirates in 6
Yeah, and
Yes,
his
we do.
and his banter with Radia.
Yep.
What if
Plus we
instead
get-
of
we
Sky
get
Pirates,
Cake
we get Space Pirates, though?
Please.
I'll take it.
Outlaw Star? Suddenly?
Space Dandy.
What's this now, Metroid?
You're going a little far there.
Yeah, no space bounty hunters, just pirates.
See you later, Space Cowboy.
Oh man, we're gonna be doing hunts on the moon.
We're whalers on the moon. We carry a
So
harpoon.
we will save Endwalker speculation for another episode.
Yeah.
But
I noticed something interesting.
so I really want to move on to like the end of the war now, and really what was driving the shift in Aether on the source and bleeding all of the Aether into all these spells that they were casting at each other, and really tipping the ethereal balance in favor of water on the source.
Yeah, I'll go into the sixth Umbral Era in another video in more detail, but essentially what had happened was all of this widespread use of magic, all of the wanton use of destructive and healing magic had ravaged the land. The wanton use of ether. So, yeah, exactly. Essentially, flood water.
Let me make a real quick note. I noticed you mentioned that Mosh was on the offensive. Again, they've themed Dark as active and Amdapor Light as the defensive, the passive.
Like I said earlier.
I've seen people say they hadn't planned this, and I'm not sure I buy it.
Right. So the few remaining Nimian citizens who had not been touched by the Green Death evacuated north into Lenosia, where we now see the floating city of Nim now, and what remaining survivors that we see of Nim in the Royal Marines too. So
this was awesome because this was called Operation Maelstrom. And this is really where the Grand Company Maelstrom gets its name, is from this mass exodus operation.
Most of the land's energies had already been exhausted in the efforts to seal Diabolos, because Diabolos was an incredibly powerful void sent. There was little remaining for Amdapor's white mages to draw upon to stay the waters which had already enveloped the territories held by Nim and Mach. By this time, the Void Ark had already been completed, and Dunscaith had already been crafted and lifted up into the sky. But that'll be going over in another episode.
Yeah, that could be a video on its own.
Which I will definitely go over. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is.
So it could be said that the greatest of Eorzea's magical civilizations succumbed to a chaos of their own contriving, yet it would be misguided to conclude that the entirety of mankind was beyond redemption for the sins of the few. Amidst the strife of the Calamity and subsequent Sixth Umbral Era, legends have long told of the advent of a land of saviors known as the 12 Arkhans. Anyone want to add to that?
Dun dun dun.
We all know them as the 12 Archons, but they were called something different, I believe. Well, I'm going to bring up one of them at least. So, there's one who it was a Rogadin whose name I am not going to try and pronounce. Listen, they're tough.
No, I want to hear you pronounce this.
How about... No, if I had to bring it up, no, I'm not going to bring it up. I'm talking right now. So he was responsible for saving Alamigo, actually, and the birth of Charlene. What had happened was the waters were rising in Alamigo, so this Archon had taken his ship and ferried those people that he could across the fringes and the Albathia spine. Thank you, Yumkempf. Kref, whatever, I don't care.
That fucking boat.
That boat which you see.
I thought it was going to be a dungeon. Hasn't done anything with it.
It just sits there. It's just the thing that they reference in Stormblood.
Yes, it's the ship that you see on top of the mountains there, in the fringes, and is the actual
in
boat.
The peaks.
In the peaks.
Yeah, in the peaks.
Yeah, it's by Alligary.
Alligary, yes. So the one that you see there in the peaks is his ship, actually, that he used to ferry those sailors and those refugees. And they've basically fled north. And we basically see at this point the birth of Charlene as we know it, apparently later on. He took the refugees from Alamigo, those he could, anyways.
Anyone want to go ahead? Just Highlanders from.
Pretty much.
This would have been the.
Go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yep.
This would have been the period where Scala actually gets dunked.
The drowned city.
Not exactly. Alfino mentions that Scala had already fallen by the time long before the flood happened. What happened with the flood is that the valley in which Scala, or the ruins of Scala in the time, were located, those filled up with water, and that's how the logs came to be.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Scala had already fallen by then. What happened with the flood is that, that's when it became the drowned city of Scala.
So I just want to add that by the Sixth Umbral Era, since this was the Calamity of Water, it was the rejoining of Final Fantasy X, because that's the Water Final Fantasy, and it was actually a rejoining of the 10th. So it's just a cute parallel that I like to point out.
And yet we still don't have Blitzball. Shame on them.
Yeah.
But something's coming.
Well, consider that the sixth was the rejoining of Ice, and the first thing we actually see in Final Fantasy VI is the Snow Cape thing and stuff. So there was yet another.
Yeah, but Terra is fire, so that just confirms that it's Celeste's game.
So I want to add to something else here. So we know that we already told you that it was Rogadin from the Northern Empty that came to Eorzea and ferried those sailors that he could save from Alameo to the north. There also was another tale to this. So to stem the tumultuous aether currents of the realm, Magi of Amdapor and Mach came together and created a massive ziggurat. These Magi, with the aid of the Elzen fencer named Count Ganelon, founded the art of red magic to preserve their respective arts without the need of ruining the environment. But the art largely died out after the Sixth Umbral Era, possibly due to the abundance of witch hunts and persecution of the learned, or due to the notorious difficulty of mastering the art. So we see a couple of ziggurats out in the peaks, and the whether or not those are the ones, we don't know. Go ahead.
This bit I didn't know, and it's actually quite interesting that it's mentioned that to regulate the flow of ether. That's what you said, right?
That's right.
Regulate the flow of ether. They build the ziggurats. It's interesting because in Raktika, in Shadowbringers, when we go to the Morning Stars, when we go to open the Kitana Ravo, if you talk, it's not a dialogue that happens in a cutscene. You have to talk to Y'shtola before going into the Morning Stars and go and do the stupid fetch quest of climbing the pyramids and
that was a great quest.
Yes, and if you talk to Y'shtola, then she tells you that it's interesting that the architecture resembles structures in Girabania, but that they function like the quote Allagan quote architect the Allagan device in the Asim step. That's something she literally says, and it's an optional dialogue from her. And actually, that's what that's what the pyramids were doing. They were restricting the flow of ether to opening the Kitana Ravo. So yeah, that.
So I believe that goes over pretty much all of what happened during the Sixth Umbral Calamity. There was a great flood which swept over the entire continent. Both continents, all three continents, if you would. And some were saved, some were not. Mach was essentially wiped out. Amdapor was flooded. Nim ceased to be, thanks to Mach. So, Cobron, you want to move on to 7, or...?
Yeah, then we move into the Sixth Astral Era, the era of 1.0. Big beats in this era. Magic is widely forbidden because they blamed the Calamity on the War of the Magi. The remnants of Maha found Beladia. They are also worshippers of Azema. You start to see other city-states like Gelmora pop up, and you've got Garlemald founded in Ilsabar towards late 6th Astral Era, and the development of Magitech. Also in this era, you see the Hingashi Civil War.
When you say Garlemald founded, you refer to the Empire, I assume.
Correct. Yes. Emperor Solus's Empire of Garlemald.
Okay.
Right.
It's just because before that, before the Empire, the Garlean Empire, they already exist. We don't know exactly
since
when.
They exist, but everybody literally shit on them because they could not.
Yeah, they
Part of
were.
their backstory is the inability to weave ether.
So they
We
got
could
pushed
probably
to
do
the
an
very
entire
edges.
episode on Garlemald, honestly.
Exactly.
Yes. But basically, just to summarize, before they were the Republic of Garlemald, and what Cobra meant is the rise of the Garlean Empire with Emperor Solus at the head.
So going into the late Astral 6th Era. Let's see. The Circle of Knowing was actually founded during this time too, which was the era, not the era, but the group that Louis Soix belonged to. And the revival and the creation of the Grand Companies also happened during this time, as well as everyone's favorite nemesis, the White Raven. The Meteor Project was also conceived during this time. Garlemald was grasping for power, trying to find their own foothold in the world. Without the aid of magic, they relied on Magitech for their own means. So why not look at that giant red ball in the sky and think, that looks like a source of power.
Didn't you know balls hold all the power in the world?
You're fired.
Oh God.
I have a response I will not give.
Anyone else want to add to this before we bonk Bonnie?
Proceed with the bonking. Bonk away.
Do we have a Twitch bonk emote?
No, we don't.
We should.
Rip.
Not
We
yet.
do Twitch emote.
So we also, during this age, also see the happening of the Bosnia Incident, when Midas and I think it was Sol. Yeah, it was. He asked Solus to do it. That was their first attempt at bringing Dalamud down. What happened?
I should probably add that during this era, we actually have extremely detailed records down to the year of what happened. Just because the next calamity after this is probably the least impactful as far as impact on society.
Garbage calamity.
Try harder, Calamity.
Possible secret lingering effects calamity.
Try again harder next time, Calamity.
We haven't
It
had the
would have
payoff
done more
from all
if it
that
weren't for
corrupted
someone
crystal, though.
calamity. Can you imagine that thing actually flying around the whole planet?
I mean, it's a satellite. It's no moon. It's a space station.
No. Well, we'll get there.
I gotta wonder what was going through Solus's head when he was like, "Hey, Nail, I actually don't like this idea very much, but go ahead, do something."
fun.
Honestly, he was probably asleep.
He was probably half awake. He's like, "Whatever, just go do the thing."
Considering that the Asians generally seem to let mankind make the decision, pull the trigger. Yeah, makes sense.
They set the
Naturally.
table and then ask you to eat.
They say, "Are you hungry? Yeah, help yourself." Asians hand a child a loaded gun. Child pulls the trigger, and they're like, "I can't believe you've done this."
What's that
That's
in
the
your
full
hand?
plot.
It's an
Gun.
analogy.
No.
It's almost like
No,
a
but-
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Gosh.
No, but I mean-
had that
I
thought
mean-
when
Go ahead.
No, I mean considering who Emperor Solus was, and probably was around when the whole Dalamud first kaboom happened. When Nail and Midas came up and said, "Hey, we're going to try this thing again." I can imagine if there was a shred of hope for humanity left in Solus, it was like, okay, it's gone now. Just go. Leave me to sleep. Get blasted.
I also want to point out that also during this age, Garlemald began seeing primals as a threat. and began the mass purge of them. So the area...
I would say fair.
What's that?
No, I would say at that point, actually, I would say fair. They're actually right in that point.
It's true. I mean, we've been dealing with them since the Second Astral Era. But the first one to try and bring it down was, I think, Midas. But instead, he brought down a giant wave of energy that completely obliterated the Citadel and a surrounding area around it. Then Nail came up and said, I can do this better, and decided to make another go at it.
It's been forever since I've done 1.0 MSQ, obviously, but if I recall correctly, Nail was involved to some degree with the first attempt.
I got to go back and see exactly in Sid's memory, basically, of what was said to Midas and see who all was talking.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to probably go rewatch the entire MSQ on YouTube at some point for 1.0 because there's a lot there.
I still maintain that there is more 1.0 plot in 2.0 than there is in 1.0.
I think you're right.
Yes. It's kind of romanticized these days. Oh, this is from 1.0, but that's just got tired backwards writing, as we say.
So those of you who have played 1.0 and remember doing the Rise of the White Raven and Riven Road know about Nail Van Darnus and how tough he was. Now, he also appeared later on as a memory, as a living memory, or as a shade, rather, in the Coils of Bahamut, and also in some way, shape, or form as in Ruby Weapon.
Which was weird to see her again after so long in such a random place.
Kind of a bit concerning.
I still want to know how the heck they got her memories.
Apparently, the little crystals on the front of Garlean armor is data recorders.
Yeah, which begs the question, who found her armor and what state it was in? Like, was it salvageable and just everything like that?
Don't ask those questions.
In theory, they could have had it automatically updating and transmitting, but who knows?
The shade dissipates at the end of T9 after getting pierced through the chest by...
Yeah. It was definitely a shade at that point, even though it had the look of being tempered, which, by the way, those are red eyes again.
I'm not certain. I mean, the transfiguration that happens just before the fight, there's a lot of weirdness going on there.
It seems very primal-like to me, like, I don't know.
There's also another thing with, like, Louis Sua's eyes. So, as we know, Bonnie was the first one, or was it Neela, or is it Koran, who said that, you know, with tempered eyes, they were blue, but instead, in Realm Reborn, they were red.
That was Bonnie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that was Bonnie.
Yeah, I went on a tangent the other day.
It was good.
Because during the Coil of Bahamut raids, basically, for those of you who haven't done T11 or T12, stop, cover your ears right now. 5 seconds. So we know that Louis Sua suddenly became Phoenix in order to stop Bahamut from destroying Eorzea, the majority of Eorzea. In doing so, he was somehow tempered by Bahamut and had red eyes, which later on we see that most people tempered have blue eyes.
I attribute that to Phoenix.
Same.
and the weirdness that is a primal tempered by another primal.
So Louis Sua is not. He's more akin to Izael than to anything else. He's not becoming he's becoming the host of
He
the
summons the shade.
hope for resurrection of the dying on the battlefield of Cartano, and in doing so, his aspect becomes that of Phoenix. So he's hosting the Phoenix.
That's an interesting. Sorry.
While that's true that he hosted Phoenix, by the time he got latched onto by Bahamut, he had let go of his transformation and most of that ether in order to rejuvenate the land. So, in a way, he's like, I almost want to compare him to like a highly advanced, suffused with ether Eggy, like what we see with the explanation of tempering with Owen in 5.4 with the Sephiroth Eggies. That's kind of what Louis Swa in Coils reminds me of. Is he's not really a primal anymore. He's technically the thrall of one, and he's not necessarily exactly a person or a shade either.
Right.
It's very confusing, yeah.
It is. Yeah.
I do wonder if they do intend to keep the orange glowy eyes separate from the blue glowy eyes we're now seeing in, the Resistance Scout and Friends, Midas, etc. If it means something to be tempered instead to hope, or, conjoined somehow, entwined with hope.
I think that having the Phoenix eyes and then becoming tempered, because the relative influence of etheric power is stronger, being the host of a primal, maybe he just simply retains his eyes. I don't think we have a hard answer on this, but I love that we found it, and but I don't have a good, like, hard and fast explanation. But that's my take.
We also want to bring that up too with the Shadowbringers key art when we see ourselves with blue eyes as well.
Yes.
For those that haven't noticed that yet, we on the Shadowbringers art, we show us in the Dark Knight armor with glowing blue eyes.
Another thing about the red eyes specifically, though, is Nail is thrall to Bahamut and shows red eyes, and yet the animation is different from what we usually see for tempering eyes. So it's really muddy water. Like the new blue eyes thing could just be, a form of retcon.
Yeah, exactly.
It could just be a form of
Yeah, we just don't know at this point.
Yeah, I think it's probably more of a retcon, honestly. And they initially did it with Nail as kind of like a rule of cool kind of thing.
It is cool.
So we saw that there were 2 attempts at bringing down Dalamud. The second one was more successful, and it was brought down over the Cartano Flats, where the Grand Companies of Eorzea and the armies of Garlemald did battle, as Garlemald was beginning to subjugate the various provinces around them.
This was the 14th Legion.
And they were also making conscripts out of them too. Actually, notably, the 4th Imperial Legion, led by Bosch von Gebranth, I believe is his name. I think I got that right, yeah. But
yes, Bosch von Van
Gebranth, yeah.
Yeah.
They were very, I wouldn't say notorious, but they were very well known for like accepting those who weren't normally conscripted by Garleans, such as outsiders, the subjugated provinces, beast. I would say like MacLeod and Ora, basically non-human people, were among their ranks, and they treated them as equals, whereas other legions primarily consisted of either humans or Elezen only.
So here's an interesting point, and this leads into my whole the treatment of people on a humanitarian level by the Empire is actually better than the city-states of Eorzea.
Absolutely. absolutely.
Go ahead.
This is something I always say, that Hollywood has ruined the Roman Empire's image, unforgivably so. And we cannot, for starters, the Roman Empire is, of course, for those who don't know, the main source of inspiration for the Gallian Empire. But first, one cannot judge history by our own standards of today, and for its time, the Roman Empire was incredibly advanced, not just militarily or in knowledge, but in civil rights and the treatment to those who weren't Roman. Of course, they were. Of course, they committed some what we would call atrocities. But those were the daily life in ancient times, and the Romans actually avoided those conflicts as much as they can. So. I would want to note that, because the Bosnia, for the question in Bosnia actually shows us that the empire's treatment to the people was actually, well, if I mean, sometimes I understand why they call the Orsians savages, you know?
Yeah. Cobran, you were going to say something.
I don't remember what.
It was about the subject, about Garleans treating people.
Oh yes, how the Garlean Empire actually has more equitable treatment of beast tribes and different races, most times, depending on the legatus, than the Eorzean city-states do.
They seem to take a more clinical approach to it, like looking at who's useful to them as a whole and who's more likely to summon a primal and be a problem.
It's very much a meritocracy in the Garlean Empire, whereas, when Ishgard first encountered the Ara, they thought they were dragons and killed them all. And, you see the Alamegan refugees in Ul'dah, who are basically just treated like garbage.
Or in Gridania.
Yeah, or in Gridania, yeah.
And to say nothing on the beast tribes, how the Lominsans basically trick the kobolds into their treaty, or just their feud with the Sahagin, who basically want land for spawning. Actually, they need it, or for example, Alamigo. The Alamigo is just amusing, considering, if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, the resistance, the Alamegan resistance, was formed to fight King Theodoric.
Yes.
And they actually went to ask for help to Garlemald. And Garlemald, of course, set a number of conditions. And then Theodoric was overthrown. Garlemald went to ask about their conditions, and the resistance basically told them to scram. So, I mean, maybe it's we could consider it extreme, but they brought that upon themselves.
Gaius was also famous for treating everyone under his station as equals as well, including Alamegans that he subjugated as well.
I think we should be careful, though.
What do you mean by that?
It's probably not appropriate to say that just because some generals were nice to locals does not mean the Empire was good to locals.
No,
the Alamegans being shunned from Gridania, they just fought a war.
The point here is that everybody kind of sucks.
If that's the argument, then I support it.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to remember the context of the Autumn War for that example, but also just generally that Garlemald was built to be essentially one giant chaos engine at its very fundamental core.
Yep.
And so it was always going to be like a very selective thing, like one hand has the carrot, the other has the stick, and they use both a lot, mercurially.
But I think it's fair, even so, if it was a nation made to cause chaos, it doesn't. It's as it ever is the situation. It would fall upon the hands of mankind when Solus dies without naming a hair. It could have it goes wrong, of course. But picture it, if mankind were as it should be, there shouldn't have happened the civil war. But that's exactly the point, that mankind reaps the chaos, actually. So it could go well, it could go wrong, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Right. Oh yes. All right. I think that covers up pretty much the whole timeline of up to the 7th era. I'd like to go into 8th, but that should be an entirely different episode in its own right, because there is a lot of different viewpoints on that. We also have the stories which cover, all of the other people's views on it as well too. So, Cobron, and anyone else have anything to say to close this out?
No, I just I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, that's all I got.
Bonnie, Meowth, Val, Neela, Core.
We technically are missing a calamity, but that's a complicated one, because time paradox.
Future Trunks timeline.
Schrodinger's calamity.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, that's
we
an
got
apt way
two
to put it.
calamities for the price of one now.
Yeah.
I had an absolute blast today, guys. I think it was very successful. We got a recording. We're gonna keep doing this, and I'm ready to come back.
We're gonna keep improving and coming up with more topics.
We got a lot to talk about.
We have a lot to talk about.
This game has a lot.
And we all have different opinions, which, you need that balance.
I think we can all agree, though, that Heidelin sucks.
If you guys have any questions, suggestions or improvements, or just want to suggest a topic to us, we have a Twitter, which I think we've linked already. If not, it is at lorelinesxiv. Just go there and just either DM us, or you can respond to any of us, any of our posts below. We check it regularly. Yeah, thanks, Bonnie.
I would also like to say, feel free to follow us as individuals. We're all present and pretty active, and we'd love to hear from you guys.
Yes.
And join us on our Discord, where we chat and mostly bonk me, but
Yep.
I made a special emote for bonking Bonnie, so yes.
And tinfoil hats, lots of them too. Thanks for joining us today, guys. It's been a blast. We'll see you guys next Sunday at same time, same place, same bat channel, 3 p.m. CST for, 9 p.m. GMT for those that cross the ocean from us. So, yeah, you guys have fun. See you later.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.